Hey, thanks for checking out Nuts and Bolts with Tone. Today I'm going to talk to you about a C6 Corvette. So I've never worked on a Corvette. Well, aside from maintenance, I've never really done much work, water pump, things like that. But a C6, I've never actually worked on a C6. I've always looked at the transmission on a Corvette and thought to myself, man, that looks like such a pain to work on, but I've never had to deal with it. So if you're like me, maybe you're familiar with a Corvette, maybe you're not. So basically a Corvette is, you have the engine in the front, and this one was an automatic. So if you have an automatic, you have a flex plate in the front. In the video, I will show you what the flex plate looks like and how it connects to the rest of the car. So then you have that flex plate. Then you have what's called a torque tube. And the torque tube bolts up to a bell housing on the engine part. And the torque tube it's about this big around in the center. And it's got an input shaft coming in. It transfers all the way back to the end. And on an automatic, it connects to a torque converter on the rear at the transmission, at the rear of the vehicle. If you have a manual transmission, the clutch is attached to the engine. This is an automatic, so this one's different. Anyways, I will instruct you on how to do this. So I needed to do a rear main seal, and I'd never actually done this before, and the directions called for removing the rear subframe assembly, removing the rear transmission assembly, removing the torque tube by itself, then removing the bell housing, then removing the rear main seal. I actually figured out how to drop the subframe and the transmission and the torque tube all in one piece, dropping it down, pulling it back enough to gain access to get the bell housing out and get the rear main seal off and replacing that and then putting it back together. So stay tuned. I will show you how to do this, and it will be a time saver. Okay, so I've already taken some of this apart, so we'll take a look here. You can see that the oil pan is wet. Got the oil filter off. We got the leak at the back here. I've already wiped off some of it, so some of it's gone. So there's a drip there. You can see it's wet all up there. We're gonna be pulling the plate off in the back, and then wet all along there. So, all right. So what you got to do to get started on this is you obviously have to take the exhaust down. Okay, you got a nut on both sides. This one, the stud came out with the nut. So you got 15 millimeters there. And then right here where the two join together, okay, you got a donut shape on both sides. So you got this cat, all right? You gotta take out the O2 sensor connector. There's that one. Here's the other cat. There's the other O2. So you got one O2 connector there. This one popped right out and came down. The other O2 connector is up there. That one you can use a hook and pop it out. Okay. So you take the exhaust out, you got to take out the cats. Okay. So we're going to come from here, and they bolt up right here. The two cats go side by side. They bolt up. Then you got the pipes that come through. So we got this pipe right here. So this is where this comes from. Comes all the way down. You got a slip joint. This one, I was trying to separate it there, but it actually came apart up here over the differential. So you got the bolts up there, the slip joints, and then right here, you got these two springs that hang down to hold it up. I'll show you that. So those are here. You got the two springs, and you got these there's 13 millimeter nuts that come through. The studs come through with the nuts. Okay, so we're gonna take that off. We got one exhaust pipe sitting here, and there's the muffler for that side. There's the muffler for that side. So this one, the pipe actually came off up here without even loosening that clamp. So you can see that it's not on right. Somebody didn't put that clamp on right, so I didn't undo that. But anyways, so then after you take the exhaust out, the next thing you got to do is you got to take out this shield right here. It's body stiffening plate. Okay, there's 36 8 millimeter bolts that come through all the way through on both sides. So you're going to take that out. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take off this cover here. Okay, and you're going to take off this cover here. All right, so what you want to do is you want to make a mark on this plate right there and the torque converter. This is automatic. So you're going to make a mark on both. You're going to match mark it, okay? Then you're going to come over here. You're going to take the starter out. All right, you're going to take the starter motor out and the little plastic cover that goes right here along the bottom. Then you're going to turn the engine over through the flywheel hole. And that's how you're going to turn it over. You're going to turn this flywheel until your bolts line up. You're going to take out the bolts until all three of them are out. Okay, mark this one and make sure you come back to it so your marks are here in the hole. So what I did was I marked this one and then I left this one in and I turned it over to the next two. And then I took this one out last so that way my marks are here. That way I don't have to mess with anything. All right, now the next part's really important. So I skimmed through the information to kind of get an idea of what I was doing. There's two plastic clips that go there and there. Okay, so the instructions are to take a 10 millimeter by 1.5 bolt. They say 55 millimeters or longer. Basically, this bolt is going to bottom out up against something inside. I've never done this before, so I'm not completely sure, but it has something to do with bearing preload. So the important part is you put these bolts in and you torque them to 26 foot-pounds. That's important, and that's where we're at now. So the next step I'm going to do here is I have to loosen up these lines here, and I have to loosen up this rear end to move it backwards to get the back side of this torque tube off. So I'll be showing you that in a minute. All right, so here's what we got here. We've got this rear main seal plate cover off. Okay, anytime you do a rear main seal in one of these Chevy motors, 6.0, 6.2, doesn't matter, do the cover. The cover comes, if you get it from GM, the cover comes with the rear main and the gasket. So I got to clean this up, put a new cover on, bolt it on, put it all back together because I need to drop the cradle down to get the oil pan out, and I have nothing holding the engine up because I didn't hang it prior to doing so. So here's what this looks like from the back. Now this is an automatic, so it's a little bit different. So with an automatic, so here's what your flex plate looks like right here. So you got your bolts there for your flex plate. And you only take those off. You leave this device here. You don't touch any of these bolts as it's all weight matched. The only thing you do is loosen up this big Allen here. Loosen up that big Allen, and that's so the splines can slide out, and I'm going to show you that. There's the new plate. Got the gasket installed, got new bolts. So here's what this tube looks like right here. So it's just an input shaft sticking through. So we don't touch any of that stuff. Everything is incorporated inside that torque tube. We have those bolts that go through that hold it up to it. All right. Okay, so things that we have to do to get this out. You don't have to follow the directions like they say. They want you to pull out the cross member and pull out the transmission and all that. Okay, so as you can see, I have the transmission, the torque tube, all still attached. There's the transmission, torque converters inside there. So there's the transmission. We've got the axle still attached. We've got the whole cross member there. So here we come around the differential. All right. So what you're gonna do to get this done, basically, is you have to come here and you got to disconnect the ABS wheel speed sensor. There's a ground right there. You got to undo that ground and the ABS wheel speed sensor on both sides. There's only a ground on the driver's side. The other side does not have a ground. You got to fish that harness through because that harness is going to stay. And here it is. Okay? Because that harness doesn't move. That stays with the car. So you got to fish that out. So I loosened the axle nut a little bit to give a little bit of slack with the axle. I did the same thing on both sides, and I tried to keep the control arm, the spindle, pulled in, so it would keep the axle from pulling out of its socket. So you only have that nut and that nut on both sides. So what you're going to do is you're going to disconnect the upper control arm on both sides. You're going to undo the shock. You're going to take apart the electrical. You're going to fish it all through. You got to take the mufflers and everything all the way off. You got to take all the exhaust off because this has got to be able to slide back. You do the same thing. This side, you're going to undo the transmission connector. So the connector goes way back here, but you can see where it sits here. So you got to undo that. I left the transmission cooler line connected. That comes all the way up, okay? That disconnects right there. That actually connects right there by the oil pan. So once you get your rear all ready to come apart and drop down, strap it to a jack, there's 5 bolts that bolt this tube up to the bell housing. So you're going to undo those 5 bolts. There would be a bell housing here. All right, so here's what the bell housing looks like. Okay. You got 5 bolts that bolt that torque tube on, and then there's 5 that bolt the bell housing on, and 2 pins, and the pins are real rusty. This was real difficult to get popped loose. It's aluminum, so I had to be real careful. The other thing that you got to do is you got to unbolt the brake line here. That brake line bolts to the top of right there. You got to undo that. You got to do the same thing to both sides. Now, because this side over here, the brake line goes underneath and through the cross member, you actually have to unbolt. This brake line attaches to it. You actually have to undo the brake line. And then this stays with the cradle. So that one stays up there, and then the other side, so this one here, the caliper just hangs with the car. And then this side, the passenger side, actually hung the caliper over onto the cross member. So that's pretty much it. You got to fish the park and brake cables through. They go through this opening right here with that. That's where the ABS sensor comes through. The park and brake cables go through there. So you just got to pull the spring up and then slide it down, and it comes off of there. And then it just pops in there. Well, it pops in there first, and then you pull it down and it hooks on right there. So that's how you do this. Basically how you take it down. Oh, the other thing you got to do is undo the sway bar right here. So because this bolt sticks through and it's a nut, the bottom bolt, you have to actually knock the bolt through so the sway bar will hang down to get the mufflers out. And that's just a control arm bolt, but it's got a nut on the backside. So that's the only other thing that unbolts. You don't have to touch any of the spring back here or anything like that. And then just be careful putting it back together. All right, so here's what it looks like. Here we go. I've got this differential transmission back up. So you see we got the control arms, they're loose. The shocks are loose. I'm gonna have to obviously jack up this corner here. We got the brakes, we got the axle. So we're gonna put all this together, and you just gotta make everything fit. But this is how you do it without disconnecting the transmission from the subframe and all that. Let's get it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. You'll get notified of all my future content. Also check me out on Instagram at Nuts and Bolts with Tone. see my daily life as a mechanic, all kinds of crazy stuff, gas, diesel, I do it all. So anyway, so check me out, and I will see you next time.